Sierra Carson knew it was a bad idea the second the door slammed shut behind her and locked. "No, no, no," she muttered, yanking the knob uselessly as fat raindrops started falling like punishment from the sky. Her arms were full of groceries. Her keys were sitting inside her third-floor walk-up apartment, and the landlord didn't believe in emergency maintenance after 6 p.m. She looked down at the soaked paper bag in her arms. A loaf of bread sagged sadly to the side. "Perfect," she whispered, clutching the bag tighter and stumbling down the steps. By the time she hit the street, the rain had turned into a full-blown storm. She could barely see through the downpour, and her canvas sneakers squished with every step. Her phone was inside too, naturally. Because why wouldn't it be? She darted under the awning of the closest building, a sleek, glass-fronted high-rise she usually passed without a second glance. The doorman gave her a raised eyebrow from inside the lobby, but said nothing as she stood, dripping and shivering, on the edge of luxury. She had no plan, just stand here all night, knock on a stranger's door. Her friends all lived half an hour away, and she wouldn't even be able to call them until someone let her inside. "Excuse me," a voice said behind her, deep, calm, and very male. Sierra turned and almost dropped the bag completely. The man standing just behind the glass door wasn't just attractive, he was impossible. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an expensive navy coat slung over one arm and a face that looked like it belonged on a billboard. His dark hair was damp from the rain, and his shirt clung to his chest in just the right way. She blinked, startled. "Hi." He opened the door without hesitation. "You look like you're about to freeze." "I'm kind of locked out," she said. "My apartment's across the street, but I don't have my keys and my phone's inside." He didn't ask questions. He just looked at her for a beat, then stepped aside. "Come in. You'll catch pneumonia out here." Her pride wanted to say no, but her soaked jeans and trembling arms said otherwise. Inside, the lobby was warm and smelled like fresh flowers and money. She didn't miss the marble floors or the gold accents along the elevator doors. She hugged the bag tighter, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked. "I'm Nathaniel Drake," he said, offering his hand. "Sierra Carson," she said, shaking it carefully, trying not to drip on him. Nathaniel glanced at the doorman, then back to her. "Come up to my place. I'll get you a towel. You can dry off, warm up, maybe get a hot drink. I swear I'm not a serial killer." Her eyes searched his face. He didn't look like a serial killer. He looked like someone who drove a car with a driver and had never once worried about rent. She hesitated. "I'll leave the door open," he added, "and you can sit near the exit if it makes you feel better." Her fingers were turning numb. "Okay," she said finally. The elevator swished open and they stepped inside. She tried not to stare, but the panel had more buttons than she thought possible, and he pressed the top one. "Penthouse," she said, raising an eyebrow. He gave a small smile. "Yeah, of course." The elevator opened directly into his apartment, or more accurately, his palace in the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, offering a sweeping view of the city. A white baby grand piano sat in one corner. The furniture looked like it belonged in a magazine, and the kitchen. Sierra had worked in restaurants that looked less professional. He tossed his coat on a leather chair and grabbed a fluffy white towel from a hallway closet. "Here." She took it, still stunned. "This place is too much," he asked. "Gorgeous," she said honestly. "Massive." "Are you sure you live here alone?" He nodded. "It's just me." He disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later with a steaming mug. "Chamomile, okay. You really don't have to." He handed it to her anyway. "You're soaked and shivering." "I don't think chamomile is too extravagant," she laughed, then tried to hide it behind the cup. "Thanks." He sat across from her. "So, Sierra Carson, what do you do when you're not getting locked out in the rain?" "I'm a freelance illustrator," she said. "Mostly kids' books, but I do some graphic design too." Nathaniel raised a brow. "That's cool." "What about you?" she asked, sipping the tea. He paused for a second. "I run a company, real estate development, property acquisitions mostly." That explained the penthouse. "And I guess you're pretty good at it," she said. He smiled again, but there was something quieter in it this time. "I've done all right." They talked for another hour, about everything and nothing. He told her about his obsession with jazz and how he hated flying commercial. She told him about her favorite books and the time she got food poisoning from a gas station sushi roll. She was laughing again when she realized the rain had stopped. "I should probably head back," she said, standing reluctantly. "My landlord's going to kill me when I tell him I need the lock changed." Nathaniel walked her to the elevator. "Do you have a spare key anywhere?" "Nope. I'll probably have to wait for my roommate to get back tomorrow." He seemed to think for a second. "You could stay here tonight." Her eyes widened. "What? Only if you're comfortable. I have 2 guest rooms. You can lock the door. I'd feel better knowing you're warm and safe." She stared at him. "You trust random women to sleep in your penthouse," he chuckled. "I trust my instincts." "And you don't seem like a thief." Sierra hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, just for tonight," he smiled. "Come on, I'll show you the guest room." As she followed him down the hall, she had no idea that this night this storm would change everything. That the man who offered her a towel and tea would soon offer her far more. Because Nathaniel Drake didn't just open his door to her that night. He was about to open his heart. Sierra awoke to the sound of low jazz humming softly from somewhere down the hall. For a few seconds, she forgot where she was until her eyes landed on the velvet armchair near the window, the sleek walnut dresser, and the impossibly high ceiling overhead. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment. She sat up slowly, her limbs wrapped in the thickest blanket she'd ever slept beneath. Sunlight poured in through the sheer curtains, casting golden streaks across the room. Someone had left a folded note on the nightstand, beside a fresh glass of orange juice and a kvass on a porcelain plate. Her name was written in firm, even handwriting. "Kitchen. Take your time, Nathaniel." She swung her legs over the bed and winced as her bare feet touched the cool floor. Someone, probably him, had left a pair of clean slippers beside the bed. She slipped them on and padded quietly through the hallway, following the sound of music. Nathaniel stood by the stove, wearing a navy crewneck and dark trousers, barefoot, flipping something on a skillet. He looked up when he heard her and set the spatula down. "I wasn't sure if you were the type to sleep in or bolt at sunrise," he said, pouring coffee into a delicate ceramic cup without asking. "Glad it wasn't the second." "I almost did," Sierra admitted, brushing her hair back. "But that kvass had a convincing argument." He handed her the cup. "French patisserie on Lexington. They deliver at dawn." "You're ridiculous," she said, accepting the coffee anyway. "Guilty." She took a sip and leaned against the counter, watching him pour batter into a pan without breaking stride. "So, you always rescue strangers off the street, or was I just lucky?" Nathaniel didn't look away from the burner. "Only when they look like they're seconds from hypothermia." Her lips parted, but then she caught the teasing glint in his eye and laughed. "Good to know I made an impression." "You did," she blinked, unsure how to respond. There was something about the way he said it, unrushed, unflinching, that made her stomach flip. He turned the burner off and plated 2 golden pancakes with practiced ease. "Sit. You're not escaping without breakfast." She obeyed, settling into a stool at the marble island while he added blueberries and a drizzle of something that looked too good to be store-bought. "So," she said between bites, "do you always cook like this, or is this another Pity the Drenched Artist special?" Nathaniel sat across from her, his own plate untouched for a moment. "I don't usually have anyone to cook for." She caught the subtle shift in his tone. "No family here. My father passed when I was 16, he said without hesitation. "My mother moved to London. We talk, but it's not the same." Sierra looked at him more carefully now. His confidence hadn't faltered, but there was something else beneath it, a quiet loneliness that hadn't been there the night before. "I'm sorry," she said. He shrugged once. "It was a long time ago. Still." He gave a short nod of acknowledgement and picked up his fork. They ate in silence for a while, not awkward, but not entirely comfortable either. When they finished, he cleared the plates before she could protest. She followed him to the sink. "I'll get out of your hair," she said, drying her hands on a cloth he passed her. "You've been insanely generous, and I don't want to overstay. You haven't." She looked up. "I meant what I said last night," he continued. "You're welcome here anytime." Sierra hesitated, unsure what to say. "That's kind. But I should really figure out what to do about my lock." He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "Let me call someone. I have a locksmith who will come within the hour." Her instincts flared. "You don't have to do that. I know, I'm offering." She studied him. You're not used to people saying no to you, are you? He tilted his head. Not often. Well, I'm saying yes, this once. That earned her a quiet chuckle. He made the call, and within 40 minutes, Sierra was back across the street, watching a man in a navy jumpsuit replace the lock with swift, professional movements. Nathaniel stood beside her, hands in his pockets, not saying much. When it was done, she turned to thank him again, but before she could speak, he handed her a small card. My number, in case you get locked out again. His gaze caught hers. Or in case you don't, she stared at it. Sleek, minimal, just his name and a number, no company logo, no title, just him. I don't usually call strange men just because they save me from pneumonia, she said. I don't usually invite strangers into my home, he countered. Yet here we are. There was a pause. She felt the air shift between them, like something unsaid was brushing against her skin. Thanks for everything, she said softly, stepping back toward her apartment. Don't be a stranger, Sierra Carson. She didn't answer. Just smiled once, turned the key in her brand new lock, and disappeared inside. The next 2 days were slow, uneventful. She worked on a manuscript for a new children's book, answered emails, and tried not to think about the man who made pancakes in a penthouse kitchen. But on the third day, a package arrived at her door. No return address. Just her name, written in the same steady handwriting as the note he'd left beside her breakfast. Inside was a sketchbook. Handmade leather binding, heavy-weight ivory pages, the kind she could never afford. Tucked inside the front cover was a note, for the moments you'd rather draw than get rained on. No signature. Just like that, Nathaniel Drake slipped back into her thoughts, and this time, she knew he wasn't leaving them anytime soon. Sierra stood in front of the art supply store's window, the sketchbook Nathaniel sent still tucked safely in her messenger bag. She hadn't drawn in days, not since delivering the last round of illustrations to her editor. But now, with that book in her hands and his note still echoing in her head, her fingers itched for the page. She stepped inside and picked up a new set of watercolors without checking the price. For once, she didn't flinch at the total when the cashier rang her up. Something about the gift had shifted her. It was more than expensive, it was intentional, specific, and it came from someone who saw her, not just her work. By the time she returned home, the sky had turned a dusky lavender. She opened the sketchbook and began to draw without thinking lines and shapes at first. Then his profile took shape. The way he'd looked in the kitchen that morning, sleeves pushed up, eyes a little tired but focused. She paused, then flipped to another page and sketched the skyline from his penthouse window, the one she couldn't stop seeing in her mind. That night, she dreamed of elevators that opened into clouds and a voice calling her name just before the doors closed. The next afternoon, she was navigating the crosswalk on her way to meet a client when a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The back window lowered. Need a ride? Nathaniel leaned out, one arm resting on the frame. Sierra blinked. Do you follow me around the city now? I was on my way to a lunch meeting, he said, gesturing to the passenger seat. Then I saw you and thought, well, I'd rather reschedule than drive by and pretend I didn't. She hesitated. I have a meeting. I'll drop you off. She climbed in, the scent of leather and something faintly citrus wrapping around her. The driver nodded once and pulled into traffic as Nathaniel shifted toward her. You look different, he said. She glanced down at her jeans and blazer. This is my don't scare the client outfit. No, not that, he said. You seem lighter. She brushed her thumb over the strap of her bag. It's the sketchbook. He didn't ask what she meant, just nodded as if he already knew. The car slid to a stop in front of a co-op building and she reached for the door. Dinner, he said. She turned back. What about it? Let me take you. Tomorrow night. She stared at him. Like a date. I assumed that was obvious. She hesitated, pulse quickening. I don't mix well with rooftop restaurants and people who use the word acquisition daily. I don't own a rooftop restaurant, he said, and I promise not to talk about business. She studied him. He didn't look like he was trying to impress her. He looked like he meant it. Okay, she said. But no jazz clubs, he grinned. I'll try to survive. The next evening, Sierra stood in front of her closet, holding up the only dress she owned that could pass for something more than cocktail hour at a dive bar. She hadn't worn it in over a year, and the zipper stuck halfway until she exhaled hard and yanked it up. Her curls refused to listen to her, so she pinned them haphazardly and hoped the dim lighting would forgive her. When she stepped outside, a town car was already waiting. No driver stepped out, just the back door swinging open smoothly. Nathaniel was inside, wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He stood when she entered, eyes sweeping over her once before he offered his hand. "You look real," he said. She blinked. "That's a new one. I mean it. Everyone I know dresses like they're auditioning for a role. You look like yourself." She swallowed a smile. "I'm going to assume that's a compliment." The car pulled into traffic, winding through Midtown until they reached a restaurant she didn't recognize. No name on the awning, just a simple brass door and a soft glow from inside. He led her in, past a hostess who greeted him by name, and into a private dining room that overlooked a quiet garden lit with hanging lanterns. A single table was set with white linens and crystal glasses. "You really don't do casual, do you?" she said, settling into the chair he pulled out for her. "I do," he replied. "Just not when it comes to you." The meal was perfect, but Sierra barely tasted it. Her attention flickered between Nathaniel's hands as he talked, the way he leaned in when he listened, and the quiet pauses he allowed when she spoke, as if her words mattered more than filling the silence. "You know," she said over dessert, "I can't figure you out." "That sounds like the start of an accusation." "It's not. It's just, you don't act the way I thought someone like you would." He set his fork down. "And how's that? Like you're waiting for me to be impressed?" He leaned back. "Maybe I'm hoping to be." She stared at him, heat spreading across her skin. "Why me?" she asked before she could stop herself. "You could be with anyone, someone who knows how to use the right fork and doesn't get locked out in the rain." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, because you didn't ask for anything that night, you didn't try to make me feel like a hero. You just were, and I realized I wanted more of that." Sierra's breath caught in her throat. "Besides," he added, "you're the only woman I know who's ever said no to a free locksmith." She laughed then, shaking her head. "You're ridiculous, and you're extraordinary." The waiter cleared their plates, and the check never appeared. Of course it didn't. When they walked outside, the air was crisp and clear, the city humming around them. Nathaniel took her hand without asking. He walked her to her door, silence stretching between them in a way that felt full, not uncomfortable. When they reached the top step, she turned to face him. "This was nice," she said. "I want more than nice," he replied. Sierra searched his eyes. There was no arrogance there, just quiet certainty. "I'm not good at this," she said. "I've spent the last 5 years trying not to let anyone close." "Then let me be the first to change that." Before she could argue, he stepped forward and kissed her. Not tentative, not demanding, just real. Like the moment had existed long before either of them showed up. When it ended, she didn't speak. He didn't ask her to. He just pressed her hand once more, turned, and disappeared down the steps. Sierra stood there long after he was gone, the echo of his kiss still warm on her lips, knowing without any doubt she wasn't just falling for him, she already had. Sierra stepped out of her apartment building just before dawn, the city still stretching awake beneath soft amber streetlights. Her coat was too thin for the morning chill, but she didn't care. She needed to move, to breathe, to clear her head after a night of dreams that felt more like memories. She hadn't seen Nathaniel in 4 days, not since the kiss at her doorstep, not since the way he'd looked at her like she was something rare, something real. She could have called. He'd given her the space, but now the silence pressed too loudly around her. By the time she reached the park, the sky had turned a pale silver. She settled on a bench, sketchbook balanced across her knees, and began to draw. Not faces or buildings this time, just motion. The curve of a bird's wing, the lines of wind pushing through trees. All the things she couldn't say out loud, the sound of footsteps slowed behind her, and she didn't have to turn. "I didn't expect to find you here," Nathaniel said. Sierra looked up slowly. He was in running clothes, hair damp with sweat, a water bottle in one hand. But his eyes were steady, searching hers. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Thought I'd come out and try to make sense of things." He nodded once. "Me too." She closed the sketchbook and stood. "I've been thinking about us, about what this is." "Tell me," he said. "I don't want a fantasy," she said. "I don't want to fall into something just because it feels impossible to resist. I'm not offering a fantasy, he said quietly. I'm offering you whatever this becomes messy, real, difficult, but honest. She looked at him, heart racing. You're too good at saying the right thing. I'm not trying to, he said. I just don't want to lose the only thing in my life that makes me feel like I'm not just existing, her breath caught. I've built everything around control, he continued. Schedules, buildings, contracts. But you, his voice faltered for the first time, you've made me feel more in a week than I have in years. She stared at him, absorbing every word. I'm scared too, he added, but I'm more afraid of not knowing what we could be. Sierra's fingers tightened around the edge of her coat. I don't want to be another beautiful chapter in your story. I want to be there when the pages fall apart. Nathaniel stepped closer. Then hold the spine with me. Her lips parted, but she couldn't find the words, so she reached for his hand instead. His fingers wrapped around hers warm, solid, unshaking. Later that night, she stood barefoot in his penthouse, the city lights casting reflections across the glass. Nathaniel poured 2 glasses of wine without asking, then joined her by the window. I've never brought anyone here more than once, he said. I've never let someone see my work before it was finished, she replied. She handed him the sketchbook, opened to a page he hadn't seen. It was him drawn in charcoal, seated near the piano, head bowed slightly, a tension in his shoulders that mirrored the moment before a song begins. He ran his thumb lightly over the edge of the page. You see things I don't say, he whispered. You say things most people never dare to mean, she said. He turned to her. I've had enough of rooms filled with people who speak without listening. I want quiet mornings. I want someone who'll tell me when I've lost my way. I'll tell you, she said. But you have to listen. I will, he promised. And when I forget how to, I want you to remind me. She stepped into him, fitting against his chest like she'd always belonged there. The glass of wine was forgotten. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was complete. The next week, Sierra moved her workspace from her apartment to his penthouse. Not because he asked, but because it made sense. The guest room became her art studio, and her mornings began with coffee on the balcony, legs tucked beneath her as she painted while he read the news beside her. They didn't talk about labels. They didn't need to. They fought once about something small, a missed message, a forgotten appointment, but they worked through it without walking away. That was new for both of them. One afternoon, Nathaniel stood in the middle of the living room holding a wide, flat box. What's that? Sierra asked, wiping paint from her fingers. I bought something, he said. She raised an eyebrow. You buy a lot of things. Not like this. He opened the box. Inside was her drawing, the charcoal sketch of him now professionally framed in black walnut. I want to hang it here, he said, pointing to the wall above the piano. Her heart stuttered. That's the first thing people will see when they walk in. Exactly. She stepped closer. You really want that? I want the world to know what you see when you look at me. She kissed him, then not softly, not cautiously, but with everything she hadn't yet said aloud. Weeks passed. Then a month. They traveled once to the coast, where he booked a villa facing the sea. She painted waves, and he watched her like she was the miracle. One morning, she found a note beside her tea. Not a card, just a sheet torn from the sketchbook. It said, "Come to the rooftop." She climbed the stairs and found him there, dressed in black, no suit, no tie, just Nathaniel. The piano had been moved outside somehow. Candles flickered along the edges of the terrace. The city hummed below them. I wanted a moment just ours, he said. She laughed, breath catching. An entire rooftop moment, only the best for the woman who ruined me for solitude. She walked toward him. Nathaniel, he pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Her breath stopped. I'm not asking you to marry me today, he said. But I am asking this: if you ever decide to take that leap, let it be with me. She opened the box. Inside wasn't a ring, it was a key, silver engraved with her initials. For now, he said, voice low, I want you to know this is your home too. She stared at it, tears rising. I didn't need a key to know I belonged here. I did, he said. Now I'll never forget. She threw her arms around him, tears spilling freely, and he held her tight against his chest. I love you, she whispered. He kissed the top of her head. You changed everything, Sierra Carson. And just like that, the rainstorm that had once locked her out had led her to the place she never knew she needed. Not just a penthouse, not just a man, but a home A love that saw her, held her, chose her every single day. Sierra returned from the gallery late that afternoon, keys jingling at the bottom of her bag, her boots damp from a sudden spring shower. Her shoulders still buzzed with the glow of what had happened earlier. An art buyer had requested to purchase 2 of her pieces, not because of a favor. Not because of Nathaniel, but because they'd said they felt something real when they looked at them. She stepped into the penthouse, shoulders heavy from the long day, but stomach fluttering the way it always did now when she crossed that threshold. The scent of rosemary and garlic drifted from the kitchen. "Something smells amazing," she called out, setting her bag down by the coat rack. Nathaniel glanced over his shoulder, sleeves rolled up, a dish towel draped over one shoulder. "You told me last week you missed your mom's roasted chicken." "I called her," Sierra blinked. "You called my mother. I bribed her with a bottle of French wine and promised not to burn anything." She couldn't help it, her laughter slipped free before she even reached him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. He was warm, solid, hers. "You're ridiculous," she murmured into his back. "You've called me that before." She kissed the space between his shoulder blades. "It keeps getting more true." They ate on the balcony, the sky streaked pink and gold, the city below buzzing with the rhythm of early evening. Sierra picked at her roasted carrots, then leaned back in her chair, barefoot, dress fluttering in the breeze. "I've been thinking," she said, watching his profile catch the last slant of light. "Dangerous," he murmured. She nudged his leg under the table. "I'm serious." "I know," he said, setting down his fork. "Tell me." "I want to do something with the studio, open it up, not just work from there, teach maybe, kids, teenagers, people who don't think art is for them." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "What do you need? Time, a space." "Belief. You have all 3, he said without hesitation. "And I'll help however you want, just tell me what your vision is." "I don't want your money," she said. "I know," he said. "And that's why I'll give you anything." The honesty in his voice made her throat tighten. She reached across the table, fingers brushing his. "I've never had this," she whispered. "Not just the luxury, the safety, the knowing someone's really on my side." "You do now," he said. "And you always will." Later that night, they curled up on the couch, her sketchbook on her lap, his laptop forgotten beside him. She tucked her legs beneath his, drawing shapes with her toes across his shin. "Tell me something you haven't told anyone else," she said. Nathaniel paused, then reached for her hand. "I used to be terrified of becoming my father, cold, obsessed with control, emotionless." "You're none of those things," she said gently. "I was heading there," he admitted. "Before you," she squeezed his hand. "And now I wake up, and you're the first thing I think about. I look at the world and it feels like more than numbers and contracts. I feel like I'm in it again, not just watching." Sierra leaned forward, lips brushing his jaw. "You're in it. And you're not alone." That weekend, they hosted a gathering, a small one. Nathaniel's assistant, 2 of Sierra's artist friends, the gallery owner, a neighbor from the floor below who brought a bottle of bourbon and a surprising sense of humor. They filled the penthouse with laughter, with warmth, with life. For the first time, the space felt lived in. Nathaniel caught her eye across the room as she poured wine for the gallery owner. He didn't say anything, just looked at her like she was the most vivid thing he'd ever seen. And Sierra knew, down to her bones, that this wasn't temporary. A month later, the studio opened. A real one, not just a converted guest room. It was a sunlit space downtown with high ceilings and whitewashed brick walls. The first class included 8 students, 3 teenagers, a retired nurse, a single father learning to draw for his kids, and a woman just out of a long stay in rehab. Nathaniel showed up on the second day with a bouquet of paintbrushes wrapped in ribbon and a thermos of tea. "I know you won't eat lunch," he said, setting it on her desk, "so at least stay hydrated." Sierra kissed his cheek, ink-stained fingers brushing his collar. "You're absurd." "I'm yours," he said, and left without waiting for praise. He never needed it. The studio grew, so did they. They traveled, not to escape, but to experience. Hand in hand through Florence, sketchbooks filled with street corners and cafe windows. Sierra drew him asleep on a train in Spain, one hand curled under his chin. He framed it. One crisp October morning, Nathaniel took her back to the rooftop. The piano was gone now, but the candles remained. And in the center of the terrace, a small easel stood where the skyline met the sky. On it was a painting, her painting. The one she'd done that first week, the view from his penthouse window, but with one change: she was in it. Curled on the windowsill, sketchbook in hand, eyes turned toward the light. "I had it sent out, framed for the gallery," he said. "But I couldn't give it away." She turned to him, heart already racing. He pulled out a ring, then simple, elegant, a single diamond set into a delicate gold band. "I don't want to just live with you," he said. "I want to build every day with you. All the messy, beautiful, terrifying parts. Will you marry me, Sierra?" She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She threw her arms around him, kissed him breathless, and whispered yes against his lips. They married in the garden behind the studio, surrounded by laughter and color. Her mother cried. His mother flew in from London and hugged Sierra so tightly she nearly dropped the bouquet. The students from her first class painted the aisle in watercolor leaves. Nathaniel stood at the altar, suit pressed, eyes soft, and when she reached him, he didn't say a word, not right away. He just looked at her like he had from the very beginning, like she was the most honest thing he'd ever known. Years passed, but the feeling never did. She opened new studios. He scaled back his business, choosing projects that mattered instead of ones that simply multiplied his wealth. They made space for quiet mornings, for shared breakfasts, for evenings filled with paint and music. And whenever it rained, Sierra would open the windows, let the scent of it drift through their home, and smile. Because once a storm had locked her out, and in doing so, it had led her to the greatest love of her life.